Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter, or if follows aren't your thing, I'll take the deed to your house. Yes, those are the only two options. No, you cannot do a write-in ballot for a third option, and I will not budge on this matter. In tonight's episode, we got a fun one. If you're watching this episode, you will see that I'm not alone. Got Mr. Aaron Quinn, Mr. Anthony Romeo of the Cover One team to join me on tonight's show. If you're listening, you wouldn't have seen either of them, and you would have just heard that.
You could have felt my presence, though.
I would say both of you guys have strong energy, so they would have felt it coming through the podcasting apps and platforms. But I brought them on the show tonight to talk about the Buffalo Bills offense, as I would hope everyone would have guessed by tuning into this episode, whether live or late, with the title being addressing the Buffalo Bills offense, because this is a group, as you know, we were talking offline a little bit. This is a group that ended the year very strong. The performance, recency bias is always in everyone's minds. We talk about it all the time. The Bills destroy the New England Patriots. Then the offense ends the game tremendously strong against the Kansas City Chiefs. But this was an offense that had some ups and downs during the year that, several things get lost. We were in our group DMs today. Aaron, you shouted it out like, this is a team that scored 6 points on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is a team that, we talk about that Colts game all the time of like, well, the Bills got destroyed on defense. The offense didn't play good in terms of how they executed, turning the ball over, not putting points on the board. The offense was very much a roller coaster throughout the regular season. They ended very much.
Really, until the second half of that Tampa game, they just really couldn't get it together, right?
Yeah, I mean, that Tampa game, everything looked terrible in the first half, and then the offense turned around. But in that same token with that Tampa game, as we were talking again offline, the defense also stepped up in the second half and got some stops. But the season ends because of the 13 seconds and bad defense, so defense is terrible. The offense is amazing. But there are some things with this offense that need to be addressed, especially going forward, because one, they need to improve versus last year. Two, there's a lot of question marks for these position groupings. Aaron, I just kind of want to start with your overall thoughts, and then Anthony will go to you, clockwise motion here. What Aaron, what were your overall thoughts, impressions, and such of this Buffalo Bills offense from the 2021 season?
Yeah, I think the real inconsistencies is, when I step back and look at the big picture, it was fantastic that they hit their stride at the right time. It stunk that they stumbled along the way to hit their stride and find that stride, right? And so there's a lot of things, Bates coming into the lineup, help the offensive line. Fantastic. We'll talk about that offensive line here tonight, but is that something we should expect going forward? Or was that just a weird, hey, we hit a really good 5-game stretch and things were gelling? Those are things I don't know. Singletary got going around that same time. Was it because the offensive line got going? There's a lot of chicken or the egg where the success for this offense came from. I think the one thing that we can take away from this offense that's probably the most important is Josh Allen signed a massive contract before the start of the year. And there was concerns early on in the year about this term regression kept popping up, right? The stats weren't exact identical matching up, so people were worried about a regression. But then he went into another God mode to the end of the year and even blew my mind of what was possible from quarterback play and put himself in the upper echelon of QBs. And I needed that. I know a lot of Bills fans needed that, where you had that one season and it was like, okay, that's exactly what we've been looking for. That's what we've all wanted. But you do need a repeat performance of it to really solidify that, okay, this is who he is and this is who he can be with consistency. So no matter all this other stuff that we can argue about all offseason, at least we know. And I think that is why the offense and defense ultimately get talked about differently, is we have Josh Allen. And we know that he can play at the most elite level we've ever seen quarterbacks play football at. Yes. And so as long as you have that guy and he can do what he did to the Patriots on any given Sunday, we're going to be all right.
I think that's a really fair point. Like the love and the hype around Josh Allen, rightfully so, for his performances on the field, the type of person he is off of it. Like, as of this point, knock on wood, he just seems very likable. He says all the right things. It doesn't seem phony. And there's just all this buzz combined with how the offense ended the year. And so they're very much on a high. Anthony, the other Anthony, tremendous name, by the way. Just wanted to shout that out.
The best.
Yeah, the best around.
A
We
lot
got
of
a little
best
triple-
name.
A lot of A's
I would
on
say
the
we got a
show.
little AAA action going on
Yeah.
here with two Anthony's and an Aaron. Anthony, same question to you. Overall thoughts on the Bills' offense from 2021.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Aaron said there. I think the biggest thing was the inconsistency noticed on offense. And I think we as Bills fans noticed that inconsistency a little more coming off of the 2020 stellar season for the offense, which is a little unfair. But at the same time, I would still, that is my evaluation. It was inconsistent at times during the season when you can't put together the plays like you did in 2020, and it didn't look as flashy as 2020. But the biggest thing again is the answer in Josh Allen. There are no more questions any human being on planet Earth can ask about Josh Allen. He has nothing left to prove to anyone at all, no matter what. He's got to win a Super Bowl, and that's it. And that's it. I don't give a crap if he never wins an MVP. He could be number 2 in the MVP, number 3 in the MVP every single year, and it would not bother me one bit, as long as he gets it done on the field and eventually he has to win a Super Bowl. And that's the goal for everybody, obviously, in the NFL, not just quarterback or not just Josh Allen. But the fact that he's put every question in the dirt this season, that was huge. This past year, there's no more questions. Can he do it again? Was it a fluke season? Can he play in front of fans? I mean, there was a million of them. Every single game this season, he had to put something to rest, and he did. In the playoffs, it started all over again. Can he get over this? Can he do that?
Can he figure out cover 2? Can he figure out
exactly
zone
what's
coverage?
he gonna do? Right, because there was so much. That's a great example of something like, oh well, now they figured out how to play him. Right? Can he play in the cold? He's from California. Oh no, did they practice in the 36-degree weather?
Right.
Good thing we got so much coverage with that.
I know.
Everybody let us know who was practicing there.
The point is, it doesn't matter what the conditions are. It doesn't matter what. There's no questions. There's no conditions. There's nothing. We have Josh Allen. That immediately makes us the better team on the field in my mind. I don't care if you have Aaron Rodgers or whoever else is the top QB. Having Josh Allen is the answer on our team. That being said, where the inconsistency came from this year, as Aaron alluded to, was every other position we're going to talk about on the offense today, besides Josh Allen. So there are holes to fill. There are ways we can make this team better. And I'm excited about that on offense, especially on offense with Josh Allen being that guy. So yeah, we'll get into it. I don't want to give too much away, but I definitely feel like there are answers along the way in those positions of why the inconsistency was there. And as Aaron kind of alluded to as well, with the improvement that we saw in the offensive line and in the running game situation toward the end of the year.
And I think that's the fun point with all of this as we head into another offseason and to Aaron's point, this offseason I think is a little different because you had still more doubters last year because it was like, well, it's a 1-year thing. Can he do it again? We now have another season of very, very high, performance and a very high level of play from Josh Allen. So we've got that sample size. We've got that sustainability. And to both of your guys' point, now it becomes, okay, how do we continue to build around him? How do we continue to tweak? The foundation is set because you've got that quarterback. The most important piece is there, and you have a great one. What do you do to now start building up the walls and putting a good roof on and having nice finishes? Like, how do you make that house as perfect as possible now that you've got that solid foundation? And within that, we start to move into the position grouping. So how this is going to go for everyone. And also, I mentioned it in the chat. We love the live engagement here on Cover One and here on Disguise Coverage. So your questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, throw them up into the chat. Your analysis of priorities for each group as we go through, feel free to let us know. But how it's going to work is we're operating on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being, you don't need to worry about it. Run the same group back. Everything's fine. So that's a 1 up to a 5, where a 5 is high priority. Burn it down. This group needs to be addressed. We need help. We're going to be going over offensive line, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And then talking about like, okay, this group needs to be addressed. Where would we like to address it in terms of position? Do you go free agency? Do you go draft? That kind of stuff. And moving forward.
The whole defense will be a 5 next time when we do that.
Well, yeah, especially linebacker, because Tremaine
defense
Edmonds
is a
terrible.
5, burn all the ground, cut
Yes.
everyone. And offense is 1s. Here, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I would say we're at 9 minutes 54 seconds. I think this
Show
episode's
over.
done. So thank you so much, guys.
Efficiency.
Appreciate you. Yeah, efficient. Before we get into that, I like to vary it up when I bring up the sponsor. I'm going to throw it up now real quick, throw it for a little loop. The show is sponsored by One Pie Pizza, as you see in the bottom right corner of your screen. I say it every week because they are a sponsor of the show. Even if they weren't, I would vouch for this grouping. Their pizza is absolutely delicious. Sweet sauce pie, homemade blue cheese. They've run a ton of different promotions to benefit the community and benefit different causes. They do something different every month. Like, they're just a good group of people making great pizza, making great food. Their whole motto is, focusing on one thing and doing that one thing to the best of their ability. And that's make great pizza. They also make really good potato salad, by the way. And I don't even like potato salad, so that's how good it is. Check out One Pie Pizza. You got the Twitter handle right there at One Pie Pizza WNY. You've also got their online menu built into the episode show notes here, whether you're on YouTube, podcasting apps, platforms, any of that stuff. Give them a follow. Check them out. They're open on Sundays now because the demand has been so intense. They're fantastic.
Interesting that their demand has gone up since being part of disguised coverage.
Interesting. I mean, correlation, causation. I don't.
That's what Twitter tells me works.
You know what?
Side note: we only live like 8 minutes from each. Not even. Probably like if I hit all the lights right.
Here's the thing: I'm a homebody. You're a homebody, and you're also a notorious I don't want to do anything. Whenever you're down, I'm good.
Well, I want to know when I'm getting taken on a date to One Pie Pizza.
Whenever you want. And I'm going to document the whole thing and tweet it to Greg and taunt him relentlessly.
Let's go. I'll go get pizza with you.
Ooh,
yeah, cool. I'm snippeting this exact part, and I'm not even going to promote it. I'm just sending it to Greg.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go on a date.
That's exactly what we're going to do. I like it. Little romance, a little pizza, a little blue cheese. It's a good time.
Treat me.
You know what? Let's do it now. Episode's over. Everybody, good night. Time. So we're going to jump into.
I don't know about you, but I'm hungry now.
Right?
So I get to pizza.
Make the drive. It's well worth it. It's delicious. Anthony, we're going to start with you because you were on this show when we did our offseason priorities right before Coach Cromer was announced as the new offensive line coach. David did a tremendous job of listing 7 possible offensive line coaches. He went super in depth and did all this. And I remember you said you didn't want to run the same group back. You wanted some improvement. So let's talk about this. With this offensive line, scale of 1 to 5, 5 being absolutely needs to address priority. Where does this group rank in terms of priority, and have your thoughts changed at all with the addition of Aaron Cromer?
I would say a lot of my thoughts remain the same. Okay. I don't think that, although I'm happy with Cromer, I think he could, maximize a lot of guys. The unit itself needs to change, The way I look at it is this, too, on this scale in particular. If you have the best offensive line in the world, you're still looking at offensive line in the offseason. You are still adding free agents, drafting guys. It's a position of need, value, and depth. 100% on every football team, no matter what. So for me, that's the starting point. Even if I was happy with the group, I'd probably have this at a 2 or a 3 at minimum, because you're always looking to improve those second and third guys. If there's an injury, if somebody goes down, just having them on your roster makes you a better team. And the best teams do have that. But for me, this unit in particular, I am at no less than a 4. I wasn't sure if we could go 0.5s or not.
You can if you want. You can do halfsies.
Then I am definitely at like a 4.5. It is not burn it to the ground bad, as we said number 5 would be. But for me, it is almost, you have to address almost every single position in this offensive line in some way, shape, and form. I guess I should have started there as well. I'm thinking Mitch Morse, right? Mitch Morse, you have to talk to him about, can we extend you? Are we going to keep you? What's the deal here? Are we just going to let it go and see you later, right? Then that situation is going to literally be the center of the offensive line. If you're extending him, that gives you some leeway for the next couple of years as the starter at the position of center. If you're not extending him and you're letting him play this contract out, center needs to be an eye on the draft or in free agency. If not this year, next year, you have to keep your eyes open on what's our plan moving forward at this position at the center of the offensive line. The most important guy who's handing the ball to Josh Allen, right? So as we talked about, the guy on the offense. So obviously that's where I would start. You need that, to me, is an urgent matter. Absolutely. If it's going to happen, I would prefer for them to extend him. That would be great. Give him a 3-year contract, whatever it takes. A little bit, you're not overpaying for him, but at this point, I don't think Mitch Morse would be commanding anything too crazy. And then from there, you work out to the big picture of this offensive line, which for me was the problem for at least 2/3 of the season. And the games that I watched this year where I came out saying that is the worst offensive line performance in NFL history. And I meant it. The stats would never show that because we have Josh Allen behind center. But for me, that a couple of those games, I was like, this is unacceptable professional level offensive line play from everybody. So everybody was put on notice for me at that point, who was out there, including Mitch Morse at that point, again, which is why he's not guaranteed to be extended, but they have to think about what is going to happen next. Then you move to the guard positions and obviously tackle. We need two things, I think, majorly. Depth. Obviously, Ryan Bates brought it when he was put into the lineup. Things changed. He's coming back. He's given that opportunity. I said that on the show last time as well. You need to give him that opportunity to win that starting job straight up because he changed the pace for this team. We know Dawkins isn't going anywhere. He's a great guy. He's going to be there. But you look on the other side, and now, again, we've got dominoes falling here in terms of the starters. Especially when it comes to Darrell Williams, he's getting paid too much to play guard. Are you going to keep him, give him a pay cut? We talked all about that on the salary cap special as well. And then the tackle position, Spencer Brown is great. Is he going to be the starter, the guy? Great. Who's the swing tackle? Who's the next up guard? Cody Ford's situation. Get him the hell out of town. I don't care what it takes. You have to add depth. You have to add reliability. You also have the contract of John Feliciano. And you need to, probably cut him and get rid of that, as we said on the salary cap special. So to me, there's just literally everybody except, with the exception of Deion Dawkins, everybody is being considered major conversation that has to happen. Are we extending you? Are we cutting you? Are we asking you for a salary cap? Are we putting you on the trade value market? Ryan Bates would be the only other one that I would say he's absolutely coming in and gets a shot because he changed the pace of play for everybody else on that line.
Gotcha. So
4.5.
4.5. All right, Aaron, I'm going to
Urgency.
go right to you. Anthony's got him in a 4.5, which is almost a burn it down scenario. What's your thoughts here? Priority for this offensive line, and how do you approach things for this offseason? Where's your head at?
So I got it at 3.5 for me for these guys. I'm not as far. So I think offensive line play and offensive line talent league wide in the NFL is not great. I think a lot of teams struggle to put together an entire unit. This is something we talked about, Greg and I, on our show a lot, even when we were at our peak of frustration with this offensive line, is look league wide. Like, you have the Bucks when healthy, the Dallas Cowboys, there's not a lot of Cleveland Browns. Like, there's maybe Colts, 4 or 5 teams that have complete units across the board. Everyone else is putting out John Felicianos and, guys that like Rick Bates, like some of these guys that are probably hanging around replacement level offensive linemen all across the league. So I'm judging them to their peers. And in that instance, I think that they're not far off from league average unit across the board. Do I want better? Yes. I want them to be up with those top 5 units, but that's hard to do. You're going to have to invest a ton of money and a ton of resources to get to the level that those other teams we mentioned are. So you got Deion Dawkins, who I think, really weird year, hard to evaluate Dawkins' play this year with the coming off of COVID, weird starts of the year. Yeah, multiple times with COVID. But I think overall, he continued to show that he's still one of those probably top 10 left tackles in the NFL. So I think you're good. Maybe the most important position in football on the edge. Spencer Brown, I think we, as fans, really hyped up his play maybe more than he was actually playing well this year. Like, he had really good flashes. He showed a lot of stuff. He was thrust into a position he wasn't supposed to be in. First of all, like, he wasn't supposed to play. No, he was supposed to be the swing tackle as by being and develop. Like, he was not supposed to be. So hats off to him throwing his hat in there, but he's got a lot of work to do too. But I think we feel good that he can get there. He's shown the trades, the athleticism, and bringing in Cromer hopefully will help him to take that next step. So I still feel pretty good there, but there's some question marks, like he could regress. He could not become the guy we want him to be, but I feel okay there. Interior offensive line is still my area of concern where needs addressing. Again, I said at the top of the show here, Bates came in and it really solidified this offensive line for the end of the season push, for a playoff push. He played well. I know Eric's working on some content right now evaluating Bates' 5 performances, but at the end of the day, it's just that. It's 5 performances. I think, Anthony, you said it. Like, I would love to see them have him seriously compete for that starting job here this summer, but I'm not handing it to him walking in the door this summer.
Hopefully he's okay with that, unlike Quentin Spain, and then
exactly. It's true though. Like,
wah.
I think a lot of fans are just assuming, hey, this guy came in, played real well, we're good at that spot. And I just, again, it comes back to the same way I felt about Josh Allen's really good season. Like, I did feel good. I felt like we would be able to see that over and over again, but I do need to see it. Same way I feel when we get into the tight ends with my guy, Dawson Knox, that I've been pounding the table for. Like, you just need to see long, bigger sample sizes. Anthony Romeo talks about it all the time in science, like the data from a 5-game sample size. I don't know if I can hang my hat on it. So I would love to see some more competition brought in. Marissa kind of alluded to it earlier. Offensive line, especially center. I feel the same way about the interior offensive line. Not a lot of stuff there for depth. I think you're getting into the same type of Ike Botker levels of depth here in the interior offensive line through free agency. But I do think in the NFL, you can patch some of that together. If you have one weak link, I think that you can work with that. So Bates, I'm assuming, is coming back. I do believe that Williams will take the pay cut to play guard. I think we've seen that Mitch Morse took money, gave money back. We saw Mario Addison. We've seen players do that to stay on this Bills team because this locker room special, they're going on a special run. So I think he does take the money, but if he doesn't, that's another problem. If Williams doesn't take that pay cut and wants to go somewhere else and get tackle money because he can play tackle for some crappy offensive line in the NFL, that's going to be hard to, not cut him and let him go do that. So a lot of this is unknown. And that's why I'm kind of hovering at a 3.5. We don't know what's going to happen with Williams. We assume Feliciano's getting cut, but if Williams walks, are we keeping Feliciano? There's a lot of unknowns here. But in my mind, I think we are going to get Williams to take a pay cut. I think you're going to have Bates competing for that starting job. I think Feliciano's gone. I do think they keep Cody Ford. There's not a ton of savings with Cody Ford. He's still young enough that maybe Cromer can get something out of him. But I think you look to fill some of these spots in free agency with some Cromer's probably going to bring in some guys that he's had in his system that can help teach some of these guys. So I think you'll see some guys like that, like Bobby Johnson brought in a Feliciano when he came. So I think you'll see a guy or two that is familiar to Cromer. But then I do think sort of mid-round, late round, we'll see again what the Bills have done here with some of these athletic freak traitsy dudes on the offensive line. I think if you're looking at mocks and looking for drafts, find some of these dudes that are jumping off the RAS after the combine and jumping out with physical traits. And I could see the Bills, bringing in some of these kind of guys to develop with Aaron Cromer.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, and you had another point, Anthony?
Oh, I was just going to say that when it comes to the draft, Anthony and I were doing the coverage of the draft and pounding the table for offensive line, and we're right. We did really bad, and maybe that's going to end up being the case this year because we need that depth and the way you compete. We've seen what McDermott and Bean are willing to do with this offensive line. You've got your stalwart in Dawkins. You've got Mitch Morse, who is a little bit questionable, but we don't know what's going to happen with him. And the other pieces are basically plug and play. And they paid Darrell Williams, but it was a contract that they can get out of, like we're talking about now. You bring in the competition. You look at a Spencer Brown type, and these athletic guys or free agents who are on the cheap because of situations, and you let them compete, and you figure out who your best 5 is. And hopefully that doesn't take until week whatever it was, 12 or 14 this year when Ryan Bates got in there and it's changed
16.
But you really got to figure it out with earlier than that in the preseason and let these guys get the snaps, get the reps. I think they had too much of a set lineup in their mind for last year
going into
the beginning of the year that they didn't want to give everybody that opportunity to see your best 5. And this year they need to think about that a little differently. But what they did do is bring in the bodies and have that depth. Ike Bacher, I mean, he's definitely a guy who is a quality guard depth. He's not, shouldn't be your starter. He could be on a lot of teams, as Aaron said, because teams are bad. But if that depth is there. Bring in the bodies with the draft. It doesn't, if you pick a guy high, that means you have higher expectation, but it doesn't have to be a high pick to say, you know, get another Spencer Brown type where it's compete. You're not really supposed to play this year, but if you end up being the guy, we're going to make you the guy. So, you know, let's see how it works out that
real
way.
Quick, and somebody in the chat asked about Bacher. So he tore his Achilles late in the season. I'm assuming that he's going to be on at least get on the PUP list next year, if not miss the entire season next year. Yeah. That's going to be a tough one for him to come back. But I think that might be a benefit to the Bills that he got hurt, because I do think he's one of those kind of journeyman interior offensive linemen that some other team would say, hey, you did do enough starts where we're willing to pay you to come and be a backup. So yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a chance he comes back. And to one of the points, you know, Anthony, you were making with, you know, what do we do about Mitch Morse this year? Well, when I was looking at this list, it's for 2022 season. And I do believe that I've seen this Bills team do it. I've seen Brandon Beane totally revamp an entire offensive line in an offseason. I've seen other teams do it where if Mitch Morse doesn't sign a contract extension, he's not the future. I don't know that you have to address that right now. Like, yeah, it would be great if you could find a center to have tutelage and bring in and develop. But I think offensive line, you can really revamp an entire unit in a season, especially if you have your two tackles locked up and maybe one guard, and you're just replacing two pieces or even three pieces. We've seen teams, you know, we saw the Chiefs really attack their offensive line last offseason after Mahomes was getting sacked a bunch. Like, so we see teams do that a ton of times where, hey, we're missing one or two to three pieces. We're just going to replace and replenish that. So I don't think it's end of the world. You know, if Morris doesn't sign his contract extension or somebody's not going to be here next year, I think you can fill out an offensive line in a single offseason.
This position grouping is so... I wrestled with my number and just I've literally gone back and forth every day on this grouping. I have a comment that I think sums it up really great from Reptile, and I've been hovering over it, waiting to click on it. I love this. A couple of hot days doesn't make a summer. I don't trust our O-line. I think that's very apropos for like what we have going on. Like
Josh Allen made them look way better than they are in terms of when you're looking at the data.
Of course.
Yes. So that's like a big stat. I put it out multiple times. So Josh Allen was the most pressured quarterback in the entire NFL by total amount of pressures. And then if you filter to minimum dropbacks of at least 30, Josh Allen had the third lowest pressures to sack rate in the NFL. So Josh Allen was the most pressured, but he wasn't the most sacked. And the reason he wasn't, and he had that low pressure to sack ratio, was because of himself, his pocket manipulation, his mobility. And it's more than just like athleticism and speed, his understanding of everything going on in front of him, his movement. We've seen Tom Brady avoid sacks for years. He's not the most fleet of foot, but his pocket navigation and manipulation is so tremendous. We started to see that from Josh this year. It wasn't just pure escapability. It was navigation in that pocket. So he made that offensive line look a little bit better than it was when it comes to the total numbers. But some of those numbers are very, very interesting. So Ryan Bates took over in week 16 against the New England Patriots in New England. From weeks 1 through, and here caveat here with some of these stats, right? The Bills down the stretch, you know, they played the Jets. They didn't play like the best teams. And I recognize sample size, qualities of the defensive lines they're facing, so on and so forth. But some interesting stats here, right? The Bills' offensive line, weeks 1 through 15, were ranked 14th in pass blocking efficiency. So not terrible. I don't think we ever thought the Bills' O-line was terrible. The problem was they'd have moments in games where they looked absolutely awful. And then they'd have games where it was like, oh, nice. And then they'd come back the next game and just be god awful again. But overall, 14th in pass blocking efficiency from weeks 1 through 15. Ryan Bates became the starter in week 16. From week 16 through the divisional round against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills offensive line was ranked 4th in pass blocking efficiency with Ryan Bates. I was not expecting that number whatsoever. Some more fun numbers. Week 16 through the divisional round, the Bills were 2nd in rushing yards with 604 rushing yards. That's removing QB scrambles. So it counts Josh's design runs, but not his scrambles. They were 2nd in rushing yards with 604 rushing yards from week 16 through the second round of the division round of the playoffs. Weeks 1 through 15, they were 18th.
Oh,
No,
not bad.
18th.
Okay.
18th. But again, a lot of that is still Josh Allen, those design runs, which is a factor. Another fun, interesting thing, because somebody asked me on Twitter for the left, like the stats of the left side, because Ryan Bates is in a left guard. What did that look like? So weeks 1 through 15, the Bills were 19th in rushing yards to the left with 318. Week 16 through the divisional round, they were third in rushing yards to the left with 278. So the Ryan Bates thing is like a real thing. Like, and especially with, what we did in the film room, he popped. Like, he helped give this Bills an identity. We saw down the stretch them establish those gap runs, from weeks 14 through 18, 48% gap runs, fifth most in the league. The wild card round against New England, 54% gap, which was the second most in wild card weekend. He helped shift that identity a little bit, right? The run game benefit as a whole. Devin Singletary started to look better and more comfortable with what was going on. That's another discussion we're going to get to in a minute. But the identity of this offensive line changed. They were much better overall. And my thought here of what influenced my numbers is you take that grouping, right? And then you add Aaron Cromer, who, I've said it, if you change absolutely nothing with this roster, right? Just adding Aaron Cromer, this offensive line is already better in 2022. He maximizes strengths. He mitigates weaknesses. He's scheme versatile in terms of what he can do. He gets the buy-in of his players. You see different teams he's coached, different players he's coached. They all exhibit the same fundamentals and the same techniques, regardless of position, regardless of who they are, regardless of scheme and what team they are. That's because he's able to coach and teach in a digestible way so his players can understand. He gets the buy-in of his players. He already makes that offensive line better. And my whole thing with this O-line is I would love them to be, Aaron, you led with it a bit. I'd love them to be the Buccaneers O-line or the Browns or the Colts or some of the guys that the Saints have, or some of the guys the Niners have. I would love to have these all pros on the line. But in reality, you can't have all pros everywhere. One of your groups is going to be kind of meh somewhere. And I just want the Bills O-line to be middle of the road. And with Cromer, I think they can consistently be that. My number of priority, I'm in the same with Aaron. I'm at a 3.5. And much to both things you guys have spoken to, one is the future of this offensive line. What do they look like in 2023 and going forward? I think you'd start to need to address some of that functional depth now, this offseason. But also going into this year, I like what Ryan Bates did a lot, and I think Darrell Williams picked it up a bit, but I still think both guards are upgradable. I think you can find a better guard than Ryan Bates. I think you can find a better guard than Darrell Williams. And to the point about what the Chiefs did, they took Trey Smith from Tennessee in round 5 or 6, and he became a linchpin starter on that offensive line. It looked really good. He dropped a bit in the draft because of some health concerns, I believe. But he was another guy that we were pounding the drum for at the end of the day 2 episode of the draft that we wanted to see picked in day 3. And all of a sudden, maybe, I don't know, maybe as someone commented there, maybe Zion falls a little bit in the first round and they grab him out of Boston College. There's guys that are good in round 3, 4, 5 who they could bring in. And then you start to develop those guys with Coach Cromer, and maybe they play a functional role in 2022. Maybe they set things up going forward. I think there are some guys in free agency, but with what we got to see what the money situation is before we start saying we're going to grab like free agent linemen left and right. My thought of addressing this offensive line grouping is either a late day 2 pick, so round 3, or an early day 3 pick, round 4, round 5. Let that guy develop. I think with Coach Cromer, again, what's nice is you take a toolsy functional guy, raise his ceiling, raise his floor with Coach Cromer. This grouping is it's so interesting because how they ended the year, it's like, okay, we can run that back. But to Reptile's comment earlier, like a couple hot days don't make a summer, like the sample size isn't really there. The quality of opponent wasn't necessarily there, even though the metrics and the tape speak to it. So it's a grouping that I'm comfortable running back, but in the very same token, I'm very comfortable upgrading several of those positions and having to address those positions. And it's such a weird, I was not expecting those efficiency numbers. I was like, I'm going to look these up just from Ryan Bates and see what we get. And I was like, whoa, like the jumps in raw stats from yardage, efficiency metrics. And again, the tape backs it up. So it's a very, very interesting group, as is this next one. We're going to move on to running back. And I'm going to ask you each 2 questions before we start to dive into how to address it. Aaron, we'll start with you because you started with Anthony before. In your estimation, based on how the year finished, how he played, Are you comfortable with Devin Singletary being your RB1 going into 2022?
Yeah, comfortable.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm comfortable with it. I think that's a floor that you can live with.
Okay.
Devin Singletary is a good enough running back in this offense that you can live with that type of production. Do I want better? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think what I want is somebody to offset what Devin does. I think Devin is, consistent in that he can get you yards. He can be a good pass catching back at times. He's gotten better at pass protection as well here the last couple of years. I think he's more explosive than people give him credit for, not in the traditional, like he's going to break a 70-yarder, but in his ability to get 10 to 15 plus yard runs. I think he proved in his rookie year, and he showed it again this year, that he's up there in the tops of the league when it comes to being one of those guys that can break a 10 plus yard run. So he gives you all that. I still do want the ability, either something different, either a top tier pass catching type back or a home run hit.
So that's my second question. Yeah. I'll just have you answer it right there. So if he's your RB1, what type of complementary back do you want him to be paired with? A speed guy, a power guy, a receiving threat? What are you looking to pair him with?
Any of those things. I can work. I can work. Just give me somebody that is skilled in one of those areas, either short yardage type bruising back, give me a James White type pass catching back, or give me hey, I can bust one to the house anytime I touch it back, because it's going to be a limited amount of snaps for the third running back, right? Like you're going to have limited carries, or second running back, depending on how that shakes out with Moss. It's still going to be a limited amount of snaps. I think we've seen that Devin Singletary in a little bit of a way now in the NFL is a little bit weird, that he operates better with more touches. So I don't want to take touches necessarily away from him. I think that he operates more productively with more touches. So this is a guy that's going to have to operate in a smaller amount of touches, maybe some manufactured type touches. So what I'm torn on this, Anthony, is where you were asking us, how do you fill these roles? So to answer your overall question of where I have running back, I have running back at a 3 in priority, but it's not because of running back 1. It's because what do we do beyond that? Is Zach Moss the guy? Do they have confidence in him to be running back 2? I don't know. So. I've only seen him regress. Unfortunately, I was high on him going into last year, and I've only seen regression. There's a lot of vet free agent dudes that I'd like to bring in here, but at the same token, I think that you can. I'm not a big believer in replacing production or trying to find production in the draft, but if there's a couple areas to do it, running back's one of them, that you can find a guy mid-round and he can come in, especially in that running back 2 supplemental running back role, and find some success. But I've been focusing primarily on free agency so far. I haven't dug totally deep into the draft just because free agency comes first. And man, I get real excited about like a McKissick type of a guy.
That's my favorite.
Oh man, look at him light up.
Yeah,
my guy.
Somebody that can catch passes and have that explosion. I actually don't hate a James White in this. I've been looking for a James White. I know he's a little bit older. If you could get 1 year production, out of a guy like that for cheap, like he's a really nice pass catching, productive back. So guys like that, I think would be a really nice fit for this offense, and something I've been looking for this offense here for the last few years in free agency, and they haven't been able to address it. So Jason Taylor is saying here, day 3 running back or a low cost vet. That's kind of where I'm at.
Copy that. So Anthony, same question to you before you give us your number. Are you comfortable with Devin Singletary as your RB1, and what type of complimentary back would you like to see paired with him?
Yeah, so I tend to bring up controversy when it comes to the position of running back.
You want a running back in round 1, correct?
Yeah, right, exactly. I did a whole thing last offseason. I just exploded. I'm like, stop it. It's not happening. It's a bad idea. I told everybody and anybody, starting with Aaron, all the way around the world, and made a whole episode of our show, The Hoof, on why running back in round 1 did not make sense and would not happen. And still very firm on that now. Where we are, am I happy with our running back situation currently? It can improve, but Motor has, and I'm number 1 president of this fan club. We need to be good enough, not good, not great, good enough. We don't need to be good at running back. We don't need to be great at running back. We need to be good enough, and that is where we're at in my mind in terms of coming into last season. We had Singletary, we had Moss, I love the addition of Breida, but that didn't pan out as well as I had hoped last year because he brought that speed element that Aaron was talking about. We needed something different to change the pace, a power back, a speed back. We brought in Breida. He was the speed guy. So where I'm at now is about a 2 because it's not a 1. We can't completely ignore it because we need to make some changes there and at least do something about it in terms of bodies. And 2 is where I landed because if we went into next season right now with just Singletary and Moss and, I guess Gilliam as a fullback, but that's it.
Christian Wade. Come on.
Christian Wade. Yes.
RB1, Christian Wade.
Hey, as much as we joke about Christian Wade, they have to make a decision on him now. So it's either you've invested all these years in bringing him in. Now you have to make a decision. Is he good enough to play special teams or be the return guy? Or he's got to get a look this offseason as well, or this preseason as well, because there's no stash in him now this year.
Right.
So he's got to be in the mix. And then it is, okay, if we're going to bring in a running back in the draft, like you all said already, 4th round or later, don't even think about drafting one anywhere close to 1, 2, and 3. That's not where we're at as a team. That's not where our need is. We have other priorities that need to be addressed. And if you're telling me we go into next season with Singletary, Moss, and Joe Schmo free agent warm body at running back, then I'm okay with it because it means that we used our resources in other ways to improve this team that I am much happier with, right? So if nothing happens, I'm okay, but we need to do something in terms of bring in a body as running back 3 on this team. And the only guy, so having just said all of that, my crush that will approach me and says, hey, you want to go hang out sometime? That would be JD McKissick for me because I've been a stan of his for a long time. I've drafted him in my fantasy leagues for years because he's a great guy to have on your bench and plug in, and all of a sudden he gets touchdown and yardage. He's never drafted very high, but I love his skill set. He can catch the ball. He's a 3rd down guy. He can be the power back at times. I don't know how much he would command in free agency, but he's probably the max level of what I'm willing to pay. All this talk about Cordero Patterson. I mean, would he look dynamic in this offense? Would I absolutely love seeing him here? Abso-freaking-lutely. There's no question about that. But he's making way more money than I'm willing to pay, right? The Leonard Fournette talk, people are like, oh, maybe he'll come play here for $3 million. No, you're on drugs if you think that's happening. He's not going to do that, right? He's going to get paid what his contract, what his value is.
I mean, we're trading for McCaffrey anyways.
Yeah, right. Christian McCaffrey.
Right. We're going to put him in the slot.
No, but he's a slot. Yeah, we can't play. We still need
taking
an
Beasley's money.
That's exactly
what we still need an RB3. Yeah. So yeah, there's certainly stuff that has to be done. There's options there. Honestly, I think they will end up drafting in the late rounds a running back this year. It's somebody that they feel can fill one of those needs that Aaron talked about. And I don't care either if it's speed or power or versatility in catching the ball. Just give me one of those to complement Singletary because we're running the ball about 10% of the time, if that, in true game situations, not when we've locked it up and are just running out the clock. So yeah, I mean it's a priority that needs to come, but not very big.
Fair. Devin Singletary was someone who, I thought Zach Moss was going to be RB1 coming into 2021. And
see, that was the other point I was going to make is from day one, I've also been the guy who said Moss is a backup. I like him there, but I don't think he's ever going to be RB1. And last year, that was not the popular take. Everybody was on the Moss.
Well,
train.
at the end of 2020, he was the RB1. He was getting the heavy, he was getting the lion's share of snaps. And then he gets hurt in that Colts game, and you're just thinking like, okay, he'll resume that workload, especially with how the Bills were running zone and his scheme fit coming out of Utah, the production he had at Utah. For whatever reason, I don't know if any story. I would love to know if there was something going on in 2020. He just didn't he looked very terrible. Like sometimes he was like, oh, okay, you would see that little bit, but his vision, his footwork, he didn't have pace. He wasn't getting north and south. Like he just looked like a very different running back.
Which is weird because the preseason, he actually looked decent. Like he had a few bigger runs called back, and I think people just forgot that those runs existed, but he looked pretty good in the preseason and then just went downhill from there when the games mattered.
And fell apart. And then on the opposite, Singletary looked good in the preseason and then just carried it through. And now we're sitting in this spot with Devin Singletary, who again, I keep mentioning weeks 14 through 18. That's when the Bills switched to that gap scheme. From weeks 14 through 18, Devin Singletary was 8th in the NFL in rushing yards with 375, and he was only 46 yards away from being 3rd on that list. He, not even from a look perspective, but from a lion's share of the workload, he was RB1 in where are my notes on it? There we go. The first 12 games of the year, so weeks 1 through 13, Devin Singletary averaged 34 snaps a game. The last 7 games of the year, so weeks 14 through the end, he averaged 59.7 snaps per game, so almost double. He was the guy. He did not leave the field. We saw him getting the ball in check down situations. They seemed to really work him in with that gap scheme, and he was succeeding, whether it was the scheme, whether it was Aaron, like you mentioned, like him starting to get into a rhythm and being able to get multiple touches and not having to do this series on, series off type of rotation with Moss. So I'm comfortable with him at RB1. I would be very comfortable with an upgrade as well. I'm similar with him in the offensive line conversation. I'm okay running him back, no pun intended, but I would also be very comfortable upgrading. But with what he showed last year, I think we're all in this point of, I don't want to create another hole, or to Anthony's point, I don't think the need to get someone above him is dire enough to commit monetary or draft. Right. Yeah, I don't want to commit any of those resources. I don't want to allocate too much to that. No. So I'm going to give it a 3. But the overall, I'm giving it a 3. But the need to find a complement for him, I'm giving a 4 because I think we need one. And I'm okay with speed, power, receiving threat. My preference is receiving threat. I want someone who can beat linebackers on angle routes and choice routes. I want someone who understands the screen game and the rhythm and routine of it. I want someone who knows how to function when Josh Allen gets off script and knows how to leak out and be QB friendly, who can transition from the run to the pass. I really like J.D. McKissic a lot. Both Anthony's are on the same page here. And I mentioned it on multiple shows. Antonio Gibson, the starting running back for Washington, was a wide receiver in college. He is good with the ball in his hands. He's a good route runner. He, again, used to be a wide receiver. He gets it done. Right. You would think, 3-down running back. J.D. McKissic is so sweet at being a 3rd-down running back that Antonio Gibson was a 1st and 2nd-down back in Washington, and J.D. McKissic's role did not change. So fantasy owners will know that, because you would think, man, Gibson's going to have like 75 catches, and he kept leaving after 2nd down for J.D. McKissic to come in. I would love that type of back. McKissic, James White, if we're talking draft and people have dove in enough, I love Tyler Goodson out of Iowa. If you get him in the 5th round, 6th round, a good route running back who can carry the mail, but is a threat out of the backfield. I love that dynamic because we've never seen, now granted, we haven't seen a big power back. Breida's the speed guy, but he never really got a chance after he fumbled. He got put in the doghouse. But we've never seen Josh Allen function with a receiving threat out of the backfield like that. Someone who is good in pass protection, who can leak out, who's a mismatch. And with what we saw, not to discredit Singletary, but we saw Josh drop back and get those early checkdowns into Singletary, and Singletary scamper for yards. If you get that ball into a J.D. McKissic's hands, or somebody who's better in space and has a little more burst, who transitions better in the passing game, I think you have a bigger potential there and a bigger opportunity for threat. So I think we're all in the same boat. Comfortable with Singletary as RB1, but let's get that complementary piece. But at the same time, best of both worlds, not have to spend either monetary. Give me a 1-year, $2 or $3 million deal. Give me a 5th round draft. Because also what's an interesting point is people have mentioned in the chat, Devin Singletary is a free agent after this year. So then are we giving him a 2nd contract? Usually you don't want it. Usually you don't. So
extend him.
Extend him. Then if we're doing that, what does that grouping look like? He's the guy. We move forward, but then let's see what the depth looks like, whether we've got guys on 1-year deals, or if you get somebody again, draft somebody late, you have that little running back marriage for years to come. Right. So I think it's an interesting position as a whole.
Even the running back position revolves around Josh Allen. That's the period. And we want somebody who can catch the ball, and he needs that for sure. The other piece I wanted to address at running back is with Zach Moss. I brought this up on the free agency show as well, but Zach Moss, he was inactive the last few games of the regular season. As we said, he stalled in the year during the season. I don't know where the coaching staff and McDermott and Bean's confidence is in a Zach Moss at this point. They tend to not want to cut bait with draft picks, as we've seen, but especially somebody who was a 3rd round pick that you still believe in. I think that they have to start thinking about that with Zach Moss. If you had him inactive and you really lost that much confidence in the guy, it's time to trade him away to some team for a 5th round pick and cut your losses and say, okay, we need to bring in 2 bodies at running back, one who can be, just a bruiser and one who can be the pass catching 3rd down back. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that. I hope that's not the case, because you draft these rookies for a reason. So you have them for 4 to 5 years and can, worry about it later. But if he's not living up to them, and as you said, definitely took a regression this past season, it'll be interesting to see how they address that.
Very much so. We got a super chat earlier. I pulled it up. I gave it a clap. I wanted to shout out that donation. Thank you very much. We also got another one now from Ned Ryerson. Ned is fantastic. 1, Ned, thank you for the super chat. 2, reading the comment now. There was no comment associated with the super chat earlier. It was just pure donation out of the kindness of a heart, because we're awesome. But Ned's comment here is running back has become a draft position, not a free agent position. Yes. Of those draft prospects, who is the best in pass pro? And fits in the locker room. I'll speak for myself here. I have not dove into running backs yet for the draft. So, Ned, what we're going to do here is I'm literally going to make a note of this. And I know you guys haven't dove into running backs yet either.
I'm not that deep. I'm like 4 rounds in to the draft. Then I'm not taking a running back in the first 4.
Yeah. Ned, I'm making note of your question. Check back in. I mean, I know you're here every week. Ask that question again when I bring on Russell Brown and we talk running backs for this draft, probably end of March, beginning of April, because I'm going to continue. We did the cornerback breakdown a couple weeks ago, Russ and I. We're going to go through multiple position groupings as we head forward and really, nail that down. I don't want to give you some answer off of broadcast tape and guys that I've seen. I want to give you the real deal. So put a pin in that. We will answer it.
Especially one of the things, since he brought up fit in the locker room, I think that is actually something I look at when I'm evaluating draft players for the Buffalo Bills. They tend to take the guys who interview well, who answer questions sharply, right? So when I'm watching these guys, I do look for those things and say, like, this is a guy that would have to be stellar athletically for them to draft, because he's not quite that fit that Bean and McDermott like. But with running back, I definitely agree. I'm interested. I'll dive in and I'll watch that episode myself, Ant, when it comes, because, those are the things you have to look for and be aware of. I like that he included that in there.
And that's a huge piece. And I like that someone put in the chat, Brian Robinson from Alabama. He's good in pass protection. I do know that. And then Bama culture guys usually are decent from there. But I think that's a good piece, especially with a depth guy. Like you don't want anybody they like the depth guys who can play special teams and that, but they also like guys who aren't going to rock the boat. Like you don't want somebody who is coming in and disrupting the room in any position, let alone like somebody who's a depth guy, someone who's a depth running back. So really interesting question. And as I mentioned in the chat, I will not forget that, Ned. Put a pin in it. Come back for that running back episode. Come back for all the episodes as you do, but we will hit that. I will not forget that question. Now we're going to pivot to another position grouping. We're going to go to wide receiver. And for me, this is a big question mark for me. And I want to lead off with a question for each of you guys, because there is some not worry, but I guess consternation, we'll say, about Cole Beasley. Does Cole Beasley come back? Does he get approached for a pay cut? Does he take the pay cut? Does he stay? Do they outright cut him? So on and so forth.
Does he want to be here?
Right. Does he want to be here? All these things. Anthony, I'm going to start with you. If Cole Beasley leaves, okay. Actually, well, quick question. Yes or no? If Cole Beasley stays, is Gabriel Davis firmly your wide receiver 2? Yes or no?
Firmly? No.
Yes. No. Okay. Not firmly your wide receiver 2. So then my second question here, if Cole Beasley goes, how important, what priority level does this position grouping get if Cole Beasley leaves? Are you bringing in somebody to try and jump over Gabriel Davis? Does this group need a signing or a first round pick? What does this group look like if Cole Beasley leaves?
I'm pushing the brakes right now on this because you're right that it revolves around Cole Beasley.
It's a big domino, I think, for this
Cole Beasley is the domino here, right? Gabriel Davis, when you use the term that I would definitely not use, can we find a guy to jump over Gabriel Davis? We better find a guy who can jump over Gabriel Davis. Okay. Gabriel Davis still has to prove it, still has to earn it. Did he come on like fire at the end of the season and in the playoffs? Yes. Do I absolutely love that? Yes. Is that the guy he's going to be next year coming into the season? I don't have that expectation yet. He's not my wide receiver 2 yet. The Bills need to address this wide receiver position. If they keep Beasley, are you happy with going? Am I happy with going with, Diggs, Beasley, and then the next guys on the roster? Certainly. But we still would need to sign another free agent wide receiver in the vein of an Emmanuel Sanders, right? Give me a guy like that, and then I'm complete. And then Gabriel Davis can decide, his play will decide whether he gets the snaps over said veteran like Emmanuel Sanders. Hopefully we don't pay that guy as much as we did Emmanuel Sanders. And it's, if that's going to be the case.
Copy. Okay, so let's go and then let's bring it to your overall priority level for this grouping. Then what do you see here? What are your thoughts?
Priority level has to be for me at least a 3. I'd probably go 3.5 at this point. Okay. But it all, like we said, I had wide receivers for that episode we did on the positional groupings and everything. And Cole Beasley was the one that I said giant question mark, right? We don't have all the answers to the questions we need. This isn't all about football. There's so much going on here. It could be an injury thing with Beasley. He's getting older. The team knows that. Maybe they know something we don't about. He's not going to get the snaps that we need. So we're going to move on from him and just outright cut him, whatever it may be. Whatever happens with Beasley, I will not be surprised. I guess the only way I'd be surprised is if they kept him at his current salary. That would be surprising. Anything else, cutting him, shipping him, trading him, whatever else, it would not be a surprise to me at this point. But we don't know what that's going to be. Even if they keep him, even if we still have Diggs, who we need to rework his contract, even if Gabe Davis is the Gabe Davis that we saw in the last few games that he played in this season, we need another wide receiver for Josh Allen. And we need a reliable guy, preferably somebody with good hands. And that's what I would look for. You've got Diggs. You need another receiver, very much like Emmanuel Sanders. Whether he's the guy or not, I don't know. You have to bring in somebody, though. As soon as you lose Beasley, wide receiver goes up to almost a 4.5 for me, because then you're talking, who are we investing in with our free agent money to sign one of the top, more higher level guys? I wouldn't go top tier because those guys are still making a lot of money, but top 10 wide receiver free agents to bring in to fill that Beasley role of 2 years ago, right? Not the Beasley role today, the Beasley role of 2 years ago, and be a reliable pass catcher. So there's a lot of names out there, and I love them all, and we won't know who's going to be the target until this Beasley situation is there. But I would still draft a player as well, draft a wide receiver. We've stashed a few guys over the last few drafts on the practice squad, waiting to see who works out. If they drafted a wide receiver in round 1, if they end up losing Beasley, it would not make me angry, right? I would be like, okay, if that's the guy who fell to us and he's the guy you believe in, I'm happy with it, right? Let's make that move. It wouldn't be an ideal situation, I think, but I'd be happy with it. So there's a lot going on with this wide receiver group for next season.
Big talking point. Aaron, question to you. So same as their priority level, this grouping, but before that, Gabriel Davis, wide receiver 2, confident, not? What are your thoughts on that before you lead into it?
Yeah, I think I'm closer to comfortable with him as wide receiver 2 than Anthony is here. But again, it's similar to a Ryan Bates in that the sample size for him is so small in that wide receiver 2 role, but the production was so good. The thing is, we did see it in the playoffs in 2020, him come on. So it wasn't like a first time, hey, we're seeing this guy pop off and do something. And for me, where he really jumped, and it's similar to what we'll talk about with Dawson Knox, is the blocking.
Yes,
like the additional stuff that Gabe Davis brings that really nobody else on this wide receiving room brings. And so I'm comfortable with him coming in because I think he's a more well-rounded receiver than we're going to find in free agency, that we're going to find in the draft right now at this point. That, his route running needs a little cleaning up, but he's getting better. Yes. But another thing that I don't think anyone, even Stephon Diggs, doesn't really provide is the spectacular type catches that Gabe Davis can, the sideline, the toe touches, the things like that. Like Stephon Diggs is fantastic. He's incredible. He can do everything. But the last 2 years, I haven't seen anybody on this team with a bigger catch radius make more difficult catches than Gabe Davis
highlight.
can, and he does it all the time. So it's not something where he's made a few and it's like, oh, he happened to make those. This is a trend with him, that this is something that's a trait of his that he can do. So he's got all the tools to be a wide receiver 2 in the NFL and a good wide receiver 2 in the NFL, but I do want to see a bigger sample size of it. So for me, whether or not he is, and whether or not whatever happens with Cole Beasley, I am adding to this room. No matter how the chips are falling, I'm adding to this room going into the year. To the point on Cole Beasley, real quick, I will stand for Cole Beasley a little bit, because I heard a lot of people, and I took actually quite offense to it here this year, that Cole Beasley lost the step somehow in the middle.
Also,
of the
Braxton Berrios is not Cole Beasley. Everybody needs to get that out of their head.
He's not Cole Beasley. And I don't think Cole Beasley lost a step. I don't think he had a step to begin with. He's not like some speed dude. Like when I think of lost a step, I think of like explosive players that can't use that type of explosion anymore. That's not who Cole Beasley is. He's going to dance your socks off and find soft spots in zones. Like that's
he can juke. He's like a guard who's going to cross you up, and
he can still,
Yeah,
you can still do it. Where we saw him lose a step was a 5-week stretch about where he played through a rib injury and he had trouble. You could see him laboring through his routes, but he was still pulling gravity. He was still pulling double teams, bracket coverage, things like that got other guys open. So even hurt, he still did something for this team.
Yeah, he would draw double teams pretty regularly. New England loves to double him in the slot there because of how effective he is.
Absolutely. A number of teams do. And him and Diggs is what you're trying to take away. If you were playing the Buffalo Bills in 2021, you're trying to take away Beasley and Diggs. And people look at the numbers and see the dip in overall production from Beasley and thought that he lost a step. But when you flip on the film, the dude's still doing stuff. I saw him a number of times running down the field with his hand open. Yeah. And Josh just went the ball. Somebody else was open. There's only one ball that goes around. So like, you know what I mean? Like you can't get the ball every single time, but I think Beasley's fine. I still think he probably has 2 years of decent production in the NFL left in him. So I just want to say that like Beasley's fine. I'd love to have him back. There's some off the field stuff that may be a concern. He might not want to take a pay cut to play and continue to play here, but I think he's good. I think he's better than Isaiah McKenzie. I think all these people that just say, hey, pay Isaiah McKenzie and he can be your slot. I don't see it. Yeah,
I definitely don't want that. And the other piece, just to add on to what you're saying before you go into the rest of your breakdown of the position, chemistry with wide receivers with Josh Allen is a thing. Like that matters to him. And Beasley has been a very reliable trust guy for Josh Allen. And it's not, he doesn't need to make 10 catches a game for us to see that. Right. Sometimes it is just getting the coverage and then that one good pass. And it's like Josh Allen threw it without even looking, because he knew Beasley would be there and was his reliable guy. And the same thing with all of his receivers with Josh Allen. So any guy we talk about, that is a huge factor. And, you know, the Emmanuel Sanders, did he get it, versus the obvious ones like Diggs. And as you spoke to on Gabe Davis, clearly there's a chemistry there with Josh Allen that really matters and has helped him grow with that chemistry. But with Beasley, it's undeniable. Like that's the first name I think of when I think of chemistry.
Third and B's, man. Yeah. And so the slot position, that one's really up in the air right now. I'm not interested in bringing back Isaiah McKenzie in any capacity, to be honest with you. He's not, I hate it. Like I sound
not his returner though, his ball security and decision making.
That's what I'm saying. Like he's not going to be a special teams player. He's not a returner. He's not going to give you anything else on special teams. He's a gadgety slot guy that does well against man coverage. Like I don't know how much of a use there is for a guy like that. I'm happy if he gets some money from someone else. I don't think he's going to be a huge free agent target for anyone, because I think also people think he's younger than he is. He's 28 years old. Like he's been in the league a number of years. He sort of is who he is, and that's okay. Like I like him. He's a good guy by all estimations, but I think you can find speed for the slot role. Maybe Stevenson can be that. But I'm looking to, so I have this as, depending on what happens with Beasley, if Beasley stays on a pay cut, I have this at a 3. I think you still need to bring a guy in free agency. And I'm all about drafting a wide receiver. I think you draft wide receivers every single. It's like cornerbacks. You can't have enough wide receivers and corners. Just get them in the door every single year. I don't care where you take them. Just get these guys in the door here. You need athletes. But if Beasley doesn't come back, I do think this kicks up to a 4 for me, this wide receiver room, because I think you got Diggs. That's fine. Let's extend Diggs, get that done. You got Gabe Davis. I'm pretty cool with that. Like I said, I'm comfortable there. But then you have Isaiah Hodgins and Marquez Stevenson. Like, I don't love this. I don't know what I got there. I'm excited to see them this summer, but I would address that both aggressively in free agency with some guys like a Pringle. I saw your guys' film room on the wide receiver. Yeah, I'd love to get a Pringle in here. And I'm all about whether or not Beasley's return or not. Depending how that first round falls, guys, I like this receiver class is nice and deep. I would love to take one of the top receivers and give Josh Allen another guy on a rookie contract that's a playmaking weapon. Like, I'm all about, let's give Josh Allen weapons. Let's let Josh Allen cook. And this is another one of these positions similar to running back where, again, I most of the time prefer veteran proven production, free agency production, where I've seen a guy in the NFL come in, produce, and I can sort of bank on that type of NFL production. Wide receiver is deep as hell every single year. From now on, it's always going to be deep. There's always going to be playmakers available to you. And we've seen year in and year out guys come in their first year and just blow the league by storm. They take the league by storm. So I'm comfortable drafting wide receivers really at any point in this draft and relying on them to be a part of this offense going forward. So I'm all about adding to this room aggressively through both free agency and the draft.
I think that's the big that Beasley domino is so huge for this grouping. It's huge. I did my episode last week here on Disguise coverage on how Gabriel Davis became wide receiver 2 towards the end of the year last year, and what he means as potential wide receiver 2 coming into 2022. Aaron, your piece of what you mentioned on what he does in the run game, that might be my most favorite thing about him. The ability for this offense down the stretch with both Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox to run these play action looks that just screamed run because of what Davis and Knox were doing. And then they would just leak one of them out and they wouldn't be open. They'd be wide open because the defense was completely fooled.
Because they can actually come down and block you.
Correct. Yeah. Like that's it. Like Knox improved tremendously as a blocker. It doesn't get talked about enough because of what he does in the receiving game, which is understandable. And then Gabriel Davis, his size, his frame, his know-how, his knowledge. I think a sneaky one under Coach Cromer. A lot of what Cooper Kupp developed in his blocking ability came from Cromer from 2018 through 2020 with the Rams there. I think, and but credit to Kupp and what he's done on his own, of course. I really like what Gabriel Davis could mean potentially from a blocking standpoint with Coach Cromer being able to get his hooks into him a little bit. You combine that with the route running nuance he showed towards the end of the year, the spectacular catching. There's a lot when you watch Gabriel Davis's film. His routes got so much better by the end of the year. He was selling verticals that he was turning into hooks and benders and digs, and he was selling short and kicking it up into a different gear and getting vertical. His ability to consistently get deep, his average depth of target was 8th out of the 119 wide receivers that had at least 30 targets. 67.6% of his targets came 10 yards or more, 42% of that from 10 to 19 yards, and about 26% of that 20 yards. Plus, he was a consummate deep threat and somebody that got
tracks the
behind
ball
defense.
well too.
Yeah, tracks the ball well, catches with his hands. He did so much from a big play, yards per reception, just getting vertical and all that. I'm comfortable with him as a wide receiver 2, but not from a standpoint of, I'm comfortable with him as a wide receiver 2 from the standpoint of the guy who gets overall like the most snaps, because I think he's in when you're running the ball because he's versatile. He can run block. And then when you go 3 wide, 4 wide, he's still in there because he's wide receiver 3, even if you do that at some point. So he's wide receiver 2 from a snap share perspective. Cole Beasley, like Anthony, what you mentioned, he's so important for Josh. I think people love to point like, well, Beasley only had like 3 catches this game. Those 3 catches are probably going to be on third down.
First
and they're
down,
tremendously important. Yeah, they're going to lead to a first. Josh trusts him tremendously. That is Josh's security blanket. It's Cole Beasley, and he's still very effective.
He still had like 30-something first downs.
Yeah,
year, didn't he?
He had a bunch, and he, led the Bills in yards after catch, but that's a whole other different story with a whole lot of things to it. He's tremendously important, and if he goes, right, I think it's still fair to question Gabriel Davis's, I think the Ryan Bates comparison is fair, the sample size, what does it look like? But even if you were confident as hell, even if you knew Gabriel Davis was wide receiver 2, if Cole Beasley goes, you've got Diggs and Davis and a whole bunch of question marks. Yeah. And those are legitimate question marks. You have no idea what you have in Marcus Stevenson and Isaiah Hodgins and the rest of this grouping. Tanner Gentry, you got no clue. I'm going to bump it up to a 4.5 if Cole Beasley goes. That grouping has to be addressed immediately. I think if Cole Beasley goes, Granted, free agency is going to change a lot. My number one priority for the first round right now is either corner 2 or defensive tackle. I think that's where they would go. That's where my priority is right now. If Cole Beasley
you're
goes,
going to get your heart broken about cornerback again.
1,000%. I'm already waiting to cry on night 1. If we lose Cole Beasley, I think wide receiver might be my number one priority in round 1, just because of not even for 2022, but going forward. Like, what does 2023 look like? Even if Cole Beasley stays, there's still that impetus to draft a receiver, because what does 2023 and 2024 look like, and so on and so forth. There is a lack of proven NFL production in this wide receiver grouping, and a lack of proven production from a youth perspective. Like, Diggs isn't old. Gabriel Davis is young. But again, that's it. We don't have anything else. So right now I'm with you guys. I'm at about a 3.5, could be 2 or 4. But I'm at a 3.5 right now if Cole Beasley stays. If Beasley stays, Diggs, Beasley, Gabriel Davis, give me Byron Pringle, give me a wide receiver in the 3rd round or 4th round with a trait or a talent. I'd also be okay taking a receiver in round 1. That's sexy. If Daniel Jeremiah wants to mock Burks to us, I'm completely fine with that. If you want Jamison Williams, if you want Garrett Wilson, all these types of dudes, that's fine. But I don't think it's a huge, big time priority, because you would still have those top 3. But yeah, if Bees goes, I'm cranking this up to a 4.5, and it becomes a position that I'm worried about. Not only that it just needs priority, I am worried about that grouping. All of a sudden, if Cole Beasley goes, because it just changes the dynamic. And as we continue to talk about, Anthony, you said it in the offseason priorities episode, your number one priority was keep Josh Allen happy. This is a Josh Allen led team. You have to protect him up front, and you have to give him weapons on the outside. And no Cole Beasley means there's questions for that grouping. One position grouping that affects up front and the weapons is the tight end grouping. Dawson Knox, phenomenal year. Other than that, I think we're all confident that Dawson Knox is sweet. We would like to extend him, get him locked up long-term. He's showing that progression. Anthony, we'll start with you. What kind of priority do you give to the rest of the tight end grouping? There's no real, like, Sweeney. Is it Gilliam, who counts maybe as a tight end? What do you do with this grouping? Are you standing pat? What do you add? Where? How? Priorities? All that stuff for tight ends.
I would trade our 1st round pick to the Houston Texans for Brevin Jordan.
I love it. Keep it going. I love that you still like. He had a good year. He had some touchdowns.
He finally got on the field toward the end of the season, and he had 4 touchdowns. Yes.
Yeah.
I really wanted to draft a guy last year for this reason. And I even if he never saw the field or barely did, it was to start developing a tight end too, because we all knew Dawson Knox is the guy and is going to be the guy, hopefully moving forward for a long time now. But the number 2 tight end position has kind of looked ugly on this team from time to time, right? Who is it really? Gilliam has been productive, but most of us don't look at him as a true tight end. He's a fullback, really, and he is in there, and he lines up at tight end, catches passes, but he's not the true tight end 2 that can be a threat alongside Dawson Knox if you're doing 2 tight ends set, lining up with 2 tight ends at any time, really. Even though Dawson Knox could be also considered like a wide receiver 4 with 1 tight end or something. But what I do want improvement from this position. I do want them to do something here. I do feel like the correct answer is sign a free agent who can be that guy. They tried this last year, and it didn't work. They ended up cutting him before the regular season.
Jacob Hollister.
Hollister, right? And the same thing could happen this year if you do sign a veteran for a cheap amount. We're not talking a huge investment here, but there's a lot of guys I like whose names are out there in free agency at tight end who are veterans. And you could also look in the draft, and what they do well in the late rounds is say, okay, who's on the board and can we use them? So if there's a late tight end in round 5 or 6, that's worth bringing in and seeing what happens with it. Tight ends take longer to develop. We know that. But if you're only looking for a tight end 2 who can serve that role and maybe see the field a little bit this year, then a rookie would be okay, especially if you also sign a veteran. So I would love it for both of those things to happen. Sign a veteran for cheap, give him a 1 to 2 year deal, draft a tight end late that happens to be a guy you like and think you can develop to fill that role more long term. Tight end is a rule, but I miss Brevin Jordan. I wish we would have got him, but I think he's going to be good now.
That was your boy. Aaron, we're going to pivot to you. Real quick, I wanted to mention, I found my notes on, I wanted to mention some more things about Gabriel Davis. He averaged 17.6 yards per catch, which was 4th amongst all wide receivers in the NFL with at least 30 targets. And then including the playoffs, granted, he had the 4 touchdowns in the one game. He had 11 touchdowns, which was tied for the 6th most in the league. So pretty nuts back end of the year, especially considering he only finished the year with a 47.7% snap rate because of Manny Sands being the more wide receiver 2 earlier in the year. So yeah, he had a crazy stretch to really end the year there and, build some confidence for himself going into this upcoming season. But Aaron, tight ends, priority thoughts, free agency, draft. What do you think?
First of all, because we're talking about tight ends, I'm going to constantly give myself a victory lap of how right I was about Dawson Knox because I was out there and I was getting beat up on about, no, we need Ertz, we need all this guy.
I didn't want anything to do with that either.
That is
Dawson
true.
Knox was right there. And I agree with Greg that hope is not a plan, but you saw you did see the flash, and I thought the drops were way overstated. I thought a lot of the things that we talked about, his game was way overstated, and he had a weird year the year before in terms of he was out for COVID for a little bit and then came back, and it was a weird season, but he has shown the flashes, and last year he really stepped it up. But again, similar to Gabe Davis, what nobody's talking about is how much he stepped up in the run game and his ability to be a run blocker. And I think that is probably the hardest part of that development for a lot of tight ends that come into the league, because in college, pass catching's not super hard. Their route tree is not super complicated a lot of times for tight ends, and that's a big learning curve. But being a pass catcher and a dynamic playmaker, a lot of guys are able to do that. It's making that transition to, okay, but now we need you to block either pass protection or in the run game, and that's where they struggle with. So for him to take that step, fantastic. I'm really excited about it. But this group I have as a 4 right now, because there's nothing beyond Dawson Knox. If Dawson Knox gets hurt, that tight end position's just dead in the water. And with Aaron Cromer, I think they're going to want to do a little bit more 2 tight end stuff and get these tight ends involved in the run blocking a little bit. So I'm looking really aggressively at free agency, and I actually think this lines up real nice for the Bills this year. I just Pete Prisco had a tweet about how this free agency class isn't very good, and for me, that's perfect. I don't want a lot of top end free agents because the Bills aren't spending money on top free agents. What I think this is a great class for the Buffalo Bills, because they're looking for thrift store shopping, bargain basement deals on guys that are just veteran free agents that you can get in here on cheap deals. And
after they sign Devontae Adams.
After they get Devontae Adams and trade for McCaffrey and Chandler, Chandler Jones too. So, but after we get all those guys and we can fill in the rest of the roster here. But I honestly, I don't know where the markets will end up, because this stuff also does always surprise me every year, where I think there will be some value guys and then something gets crazy and we're looking at values that are way off. But I love Durham Smythe, the Miami tight end. I would love to get him in here as a tight end too. I like Will Dissly a lot out of Seattle. I think that'd be a nice tight end too. Tyler Conklin out of Minnesota. Any of these guys you could get in here.
Cox, that's the name I was looking for.
Mo Alley Cox, I can live with a Mo Alley Cox. Jesse James, the Bills were in on Jesse James a couple years ago.
He's getting older, but him.
He is, but as a tight end too, hey, if we needed to get through 2 games as a tight end 1, I can rely on any of those names that we just talked about. Hey, if I got to get through a patch here where Dawson Knox gets hurt, that's a guy that can be your tight end 1. But if he's just a tight end 2 for 2 tight end sets or coming in and mixing things up a little bit, you have a reliable guy that is a blocker, can do some stuff in the pass game. And that's what we need, I think, going forward. I don't want to rely on a Tommy Sweeney anymore. I don't mind using Gilliam in that role, but I actually like Gilliam as an actual fullback and lined up in the backfield doing some of the stuff back there. So allow him to be himself. But ultimately what's going to be needed out of that position is all these guys that I mentioned also play special teams. You're going to need one of these guys that is also playing teams at the tight end 2 spot, because let's be honest, they're not going to see the field a ton. Even if you are getting a little bit more 2 tight end packages, you're still going to be pretty limited snap count wise. So I think it's a high priority in that, gosh, if Dawson Knox goes down, there's nothing. And I don't want to go into a game plan where you don't account for tight ends at all, because there's just no option for the Bills. So I still want to be able to have that option if something was to happen to Dawson Knox. And going into the end of the year here, there really wasn't that.
That's very fair, and I'm probably saying that because I also have it as a 4. I thought it was going to be a sneaky 4. I just think you can't always operate with the whole like, well, what if this happens? Perfect storm, worst case scenario. Part of that was my thinking last year with wanting a corner in the first 3 rounds, because I was like, well, God forbid what happens if Tre'Davious White goes down.
So it's your fault.
It legitimate. I'll take the blame, man. It's my fault. It's also my fault that, we lost to Pittsburgh to start the year because I was on the post game for the first time. I blame myself.
Sure.
I think that contingency plan piece is very important. And it's weird because, again, like, you're not going to commit a bunch of financial resources or draft capital for your number 2 tight end, but also with how the Bills have operated with tight end, like, they really just carry the 2. Yeah. Like, that's it. It's Knox and then it's been Sweeney. So if something happens to Knox, God forbid, knock on wood, all of a sudden that guy's thrown into a starting role. And when you have a tight end like Knox, who more is being asked of him in the run game, and when he gets the ball in the pass game, the juggernaut is a real thing. He's physical. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's possible from time to time he's going to miss a game, or maybe he misses 2 or 3. And then do you have somebody that is capable? What's nice, Aaron, to your point, I really think the potential tight end market has a lot of depth options, whether it's, the Disleys and the Smythes and the Dwellys of the world. My favorite would be Conklin. I think he's going to get paid a little more, and he's going to go somewhere else because he was tight end 1 for Minnesota and flashed some traits and some ability. So I think he goes somewhere, but I would love to snag him. Mo Alley-Cox is a good blocker, and I know he gets knocked a little for his receiving ability and his tightness.
Not a ton of athleticism, yeah.
No, not a ton, but he looked great running slants and overs against the Bills in the playoffs.
Sure. Yeah.
But he's also a guy who, like, okay, if my tight end 2 is just a masher who can leak out and I can float the ball to him, okay, I'll consider that. I want the ability to, I don't think we need to become a 12 personnel team and we have to run all these 2 tight end sets, but I want the option to. I want to know that, okay, this defense can't defend it. Let's go in 12 personnel. Let's run play action all day and just mash. Give me 2 tight ends, Diggs and Gabriel Davis, and our running back, and let's just run play action nonstop. So the defense is like, what is going on? Are they running it? Are they passing it? Is this an RPO? They're in a screen now. Oh my, someone's in motion. Like, what is going on? And then also for that contingency piece, because again, we saw some inefficiency with this offense at multiple times in the year, but when Dawson Knox went down, there was a clear, no disrespect to Tommy Sweeney, there was a clear drop off. And what Dawson Knox can do now, how we started to really hone in on his craft a little bit. He's not a complete unicorn, but he's a tremendously athletic tight end. And there's not a lot of guys who can do what he does because he has that athletic skill set.
You joked about Beasley leading the wide receivers in the yards after catch, but Knox is the yards after catch guy for this Bills team right now, and by quite a bit. So I do think he's up in that unicorn area of tight ends of super athletes, and a lot of the super athletes aren't good blockers at tight end.
Very true.
So he adds that too.
I was going to comment on that too. I was going to say that the blocking ability for Knox is literal icing on the cake, right?
Yes.
The formula was always Knox is the pass catcher, tight end 2 is your blocker, right? So you blame. But in that scenario, when you bring in tight end 2, you kind of sell it out that, okay,
correct.
Tight end 2 is not catching the ball.
Like, okay,
Tommy Sweeney is not getting the ball, right? He's in there to block, most likely, versus Knox. Now that Knox can block, tight end 2 becomes a lot more versatile. You don't need just a blocker. You can get another pass catcher, another guy who can be a threat in 2 tight end sets. So that icing on the cake is so huge for this team. Even the most optimistic, I don't know, Aaron, if you said anything about Knox's blocking. I highly doubt it because I never heard that from anybody. It was all about Knox's pass catching ability, his ability as a tight end, his yards after catch, he's a bruiser, all of that. But nobody saw this coming. And now that it's there and it's improving, maybe it even gets better. He truly is a unicorn in that sense that his blocking and pass catching ability is top notch, and he can be there every play, cementing that tight end 1 position and giving us the flexibility.
And I've said it, I think multiple times throughout this offseason. I think that's something that gets lost in the play of like all these great 2-way tight ends and all that. Like Travis Kelce is a tremendous receiver. Yeah. He's also a functional blocker. Rob Gronkowski was a good receiver, a great blocker. Tony Gonzalez
can do both.
Kittle can do both. Yes, like Kittle's probably the most
unicorn.
Yeah, he's probably the most unicorn-ish because he's a plus blocker and a plus receiver. Like his talent, his functionality in both of those roles is just unreal. He excels at both. Kelsey can block. Kittle can block, does whatever verbiage you want to use there. But yeah, I thought interesting. I thought I was going to be the only one who was like up in the tight end piece. But
one you didn't have us grade, obviously, because quarterback is all set. But
okay, we can talk about
what about quarterback 2? Is it where I think I would have that like a 4.5?
I am a bit concerned with that. I would love if Mitchell Trubisky stayed. I don't know if he's going to. Yeah, that makes it easy. It's
a musical chairs game, right? Like, there's a good chance that he's the guy that gets the chair.
And with no Davis Webb now, like, I'm interested. Like, what does the QB room look like? No Davis Webb. Like, Dable's gone. Dorsey's in there. Does QB2 have to be somebody who's more of a heady guy? Who
you got Joe Brady, baby.
Yeah, but then you also like. What Anthony, I see, the light bulb ticked. What do you got for QB2? What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I am the opposite of you, and I want Mitch Trubisky gone and becoming a starter in this league. Not that I don't think he has value to this team anymore, obviously.
I know where
but the formula has worked, right? I'm not worried about QB2. You know why? Because there's 6 guys on the bottom of that QB list right now that could be starters in the NFL, could be today or tomorrow or whatever, that are going to have to settle for a backup role. So the Bills want to be in that situation where we no longer even have to make the call. They're going to be calling us and saying, hey, you need somebody to sit down behind Josh Allen for a year and look good and pad their resume so that they could become a starter in the next year.
Yeah, but Mitch didn't. If Mitch gets a job as a starter, it's not because of anything he did in Buffalo. There's people aren't going to look at this Buffalo as I got to play the last 2 weeks of the season because the Bills got first place and now I'm getting those minutes. If he gets it, it's because what he did in Chicago and proved that he can be a winning quarterback in the league. And everybody's sick of these other retreads. And so they're going to give him a chance over the other retreads.
So Buffalo is not going to be the place where you revitalize your career and say, I wasn't that guy. But it is the place to reset your career, right? Sure. For Mitch, he was saying, I just need a year off from all the drama that happened in Chicago. I don't care who that is. Again, those quarterbacks that we've all heard the names of at the bottom of the, quarterback depth charts right now, bring in whoever it is at that position who needs that same type of scenario. Teddy Bridgewater-esque, right? Like, okay, he was a starter there. He bounced around. He went back to Denver and became a starter there. And then, is he the guy there? I would love for a situation like that. Like, I truly feel now that there will be a guy out there for us to sign. Mitch Trubisky was a great situation that just happened to work out because he was willing to do that. These other guys are more likely to seek out a position that is a better opportunity for them to start, but they're not all going to get it. So one of them will say, you know what, I will take this 1 year reset and be a good backup that can be a starter that we can rely on more than the bodies that were behind before we had Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, I haven't looked at how many teams actually will have like a chance to be a starter. And plus, I haven't looked at quarterbacks in the draft, right, of where that is going to shake out here this year. The teams that do have a starting role out there that are going to be after a draft. So I don't know how many jobs are available, but I do think there's more quarterbacks than there are jobs available for starting jobs. Yes. I do see a scenario where Mitch Trubisky goes out on the market and that either there's not the right opportunity to be a starter or the money's not there to be a bridge type quarterback. So if that is the case, to Anthony's point, I'd love to get him back in that. He and Josh seem to have a good relationship. That's a good QB room. He's not pushing Josh for the starting job. He's not antsy to get his shot and get another contract out. Like I think he wants that, but he respected it last year. So I think that there's opportunities for him, but Mariota is a talented guy, but all these guys that we're talking about are at the top of that list. I think they're probably either a hair over Trubisky or right there with Trubisky. Like those are going to be the good guys taking those jobs. If Trubisky's gone, I think the Bills are looking at guys like Jacoby Brissett's.
Give me Colt McCoy.
Okay, I like
Colt McCoy's of the world. Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick maybe for his final.
That would be poetic.
That's like right here.
It hits you in the heart. But that's where I don't think you're going to be getting the top end of the free agency guys that are looking for starting jobs.
Well, even Mitch was a surprise. I remember when the news dropped last year. Everybody was like, "Mitchell, what? Trubisky, what?" Like, and the thought was,
agreed to this,
right? Yeah, everybody was like, he came here to be a backup. What is going on? Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Aaron, with this backup role, because it's not obviously a priority, but I mean, knock on wood, Josh is good to go. But Josh Allen, he plays a physical style, whether it's, scrambling, whether it's design runs, all these things. Like he has, I don't want to say he has a propensity of getting hurt, but he plays a style where he might receive some knocks from time to time. No pun intended with Dawson Knox there. But you want to see some stability,
capable
yes,
person,
somebody who can go in at QB2 and the wheels just won't completely fall off.
Yeah.
And
a guy that you can win games with, maybe not a guy that can win games for you. Right?
No, but you want somebody who can come in and game manage, but isn't going to be like, well, we're screwed because Timmy's in at quarterback and he sucks.
Right.
And then you combine that with what's the effect in the quarterback room. I love the idea. Colt McCoy is my ideal one because he's been around the game. He's got a great mind for it. He showed last year he could step in and start multiple games in Arizona. But I think he's just a good football guy and a good football mind.
Case Keenum. What about a Case Keenum?
Oh, Case Keenum is also in that boat.
He was just as good as the starter in Cleveland this year.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Who
That's
was
Anthony's
that?
guy. Baker
Who
Mayfield.
was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Anthony's guy.
Baker Mayfield. I've been
Baker
arguing
Mayfield.
with people on that one for years. Talk about a slam dunk. I've got a lot of people to call up about a Baker Mayfield take.
Well, let's not let Ant get a dissertation on.
I know.
I'm waiting for him to put on like a pair of like
Right.
glasses and pull out some parchment.
Pull out a podium.
Yeah, I'm waiting for like the Chris Jericho armbar parchment to come out now and everything to go through. Man,
You made the list.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Like, you just made the list. That clicks pen and just, yeah. Timmy from Long Island said that Baker Mayfield would be sweet. Guess what, Timmy? Yeah, I just expect that. This episode has been informative, entertaining, fun. I don't know how the viewers feel. That's just my own personal perspective. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without the two of you guys. So one, thank you guys very much for joining me. I appreciate you guys. I put out the bat signal in the group DM and you guys answered right away as you are wants to do.
Greg left me this week.
I know. Are you okay?
I'll be all right.
What a jerk. He went all the way to the West Coast. You know he's seeing someone else out there while he's there too.
Whoa. Greg gets around.
Wait until he hears about the pizza date.
I know. Wait till he hears about our pizza date. Oh,
Oh.
awesome. Thank you so much, Ned.
Thanks,
Appreciate
man.
you coming back with a donation and said, thanks, guys. Great show as always. Appreciate you, Ned. And I'm going to keep saying it because I'm not going to forget that question. We will get you back on that. And I appreciate you. Aaron, I think people know who you are and where you are, but let's, as we start to wrap up here, let them know who you are, where they can find you, what you like, hobbies, your zodiac sign, any type of allergies, any type of anything you want to share with the people.
Yeah, so Aaron Quinn 716. I'm a Capricorn.
Okay.
I am an introvert. I don't like to go out all that much.
That is
I find
accurate.
ways to get out of things
Yes,
that
he
I
does.
already planned. So when I have something planned, I think about it all day. I'm like, wait a minute, how can I get out
How
of
can I
what
get
I
out?
already decided I was going to do? So don't try to make plans with me. But no, you can find me here at Cover One on different shows. You can find me usually following up. We're usually getting ready to go live at 9:00, but not tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg Thompson. Everybody knows him. So come find us and engage with us on Twitter. It's going to be probably a difficult offseason at times, but a fun offseason nonetheless. So, Ant, thanks for having me over here on Disguised Coverage, man, and taking me home and giving me a home for the night on this Wednesday. I appreciate that.
I shelter you. I gave you a quarter. No, I appreciate you coming by. It's always a great time. Mr. Romeo, let the people know where they can find you. Same thing, likes, dislikes, zodiac sign, what you wrote your thesis on to get your doctorate, all that kind of stuff, whatever you want to share.
Yes, of course. So Dr. Anthony Romeo, PhD. I'm a Capricorn as well, but I'm an extroverted extrovert. I go out of my way to be around people and do things no matter what, I'd much rather be around anyone and talking and hanging out and just physically being in the presence of other people than being away from. I am 100% extrovert, which is most people find like, really 100%? Absolutely. Maybe it's because
We're
I
like
come
the yin
from
and yang.
I know I come from a huge family. I got a lot of siblings. Maybe that's why I just never had alone time. So I don't know what that is. So reading a book, what's that? It's always too crazy for that. But you all know where to find me. I'm on the Hoof podcast with my guys, Sterling and Eric. We're taking a little break after the Super Bowl, but we're going to start up and start prepping soon here, which is great. Thank you, Ant, for the opportunity to come on here because it fulfills my weekly need to get on and talk Bills with people still. during this downtime for the Hoof. So yeah, thanks again. And you can find me on Twitter at Anthony Romeo NY.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the hell out of you guys. I appreciate you guys appreciating me, but yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do this without you guys. Thank you very much for stopping by, for being prepared, for having a nice, fun conversation with good rapport. I appreciate the hell out of you guys for that. And everybody who rode with us live on this episode, we appreciate you tremendously. All the engagement, the comments, the thoughts. I think we're, as a brand, I think we're really lucky with the type of fans that we have, and especially the ones who engage with us live on these shows. It's a lot of thought-provoking questions. It's a lot of good back and forth, whether it's with us, whether it's with everyone else in the chat. So thank you very much for the engagement. Thank you very much for tuning in live and joining us and riding with us. If you didn't watch this live and you're watching it later, or you're listening later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your listen, your download, anything and everything, your kind words to tell people about how great we are. Thank you so much. If you didn't like the show or didn't think it was great, that's fine. As I tell everybody, if you thought the show was terrible, try and ruin your enemy's day and tell them about the show, because a listen's a listen. Any press is good press type of thing that we're in right now. But if you're watching, you're here on YouTube, please drop a like on your way out or while you're watching now. I know it sounds corny, I say it every week, but a like goes a tremendously long way in terms of the algorithms to helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage, to all the plethora of shows that we have on Cover One. We literally have you covered basically every single day of the week. And as many people have said in the chat, I like how people in the chat are starting to say their zodiac sign. That's distracting me. And that's really funny. I like that a lot. As people in the chat have said, there is no real offseason and things are really starting to ramp up. The NFL Combine is next week. Free agency starts. People can start talking about stuff on Monday the 14th, and then it goes live Wednesday the 16th. Yeah, start talking. We'll
crazy.
start to see. I know, right? We'll start to see news dropping, and then everything officially happens Wednesday the 16th. Before you know it, the draft is here at the end of April. Then we have mini camps, training camp, preseason. It never stops, literally. So ride with us the entire way. We got you covered almost every day of the week with tremendous coverage from so many shows on Cover One. And we got, several of them represented here with the Cover One Buffalo show with Aaron, the Hoof with Mr. Romeo, and myself from Disguised Coverage and from the film room as well. So appreciate everybody for supporting us in any way, shape, and form. All the chat, comments, donations, anything and everything. Thank you so much. Hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.